Welcome back, dear listeners, to another episode of Real Crime Stories. On July 26, 2022, in Gwinnett County, Georgia, at around 9 a.m., a distressing call was made to emergency services. The person on the line was the younger sister of Susan Morales. She was only 16 at the time, still just a teenager, and she reported her sister as missing. Susan had left home the previous day, and after many hours, she still hadn't returned. Investigators promptly responded to the call and arrived at the Morales residence. They quickly confirmed that the girl had left the house the day before, around 6 p.m. She had planned to visit a school friend to do some homework and spend time together. Later that evening, at 9 p.m., Susan's mother called and told her it was time to come home. Susan agreed and said goodbye to her friend. But tragically, she never made it back. Now here's something particularly noteworthy, especially for any parents listening who have teenage children. The two girls were very close, best friends, really. They had a location-sharing app installed on their phones. With each other's permission, they could track one another in real time, see where the other person was, whether they got home safely, and so on. That night, Susan's friend opened the app to watch her progress home. Everything seemed fine at first. Susan had shared her location and was on her way, essentially being watched over virtually. But then something unexpected happened. A few minutes into the walk, the signal was lost. The app sent an alert saying there had been a possible accident, or that Susan's phone had shut off or malfunctioned. Her friend immediately tried to call, but Susan's number was no longer reachable. Police arrived at the location where Susan had last been tracked, but nobody had seen anything. They interviewed multiple witnesses, family members, friends, neighbors, trying to reconstruct her last known movements. Everyone hoped she was still alive, but there were no clues, no leads, no evidence pointing investigators in any direction. Weeks turned into months, and still, nothing surfaced. Susan's family distributed flyers, the community organized search parties, and there was a strong hope that she'd return home safely. The small town began holding marches and vigils, urging the police to intensify their efforts. The pressure on law enforcement grew. People demanded answers. What happened to 16-year-old Susan Morales? Time passed, and half a year had gone by since Susan vanished. Still, there were no leads, no breakthroughs. Her family was living a nightmare. She had disappeared suddenly, without a trace. Authorities even created a special task force, focused entirely on this one case. Susan was from a town called Norcross. She had two sisters and was raised by her mother. A high school student, she was a cheerleader and dreamed of becoming a singer one day. As mentioned earlier, on the day she went missing, she had spent time with a friend. They had goofed around, recorded funny videos, and shared them online. It was all lighthearted and fun. At 9 p.m., as her mom asked, she left to head home. The walk should have taken no more than 10 minutes. Surveillance footage confirmed she was indeed on her way. She was captured on several cameras along the route. But once she moved past the last area monitored by CCTV, her direction suddenly changed. She started heading in a completely different direction from where she should have gone. What's more, the location-sharing app showed that her speed increased dramatically to nearly 70 kilometers per hour. Investigators concluded that she had likely gotten into a car. But did she get in willingly? Or was she forced? Just 5 minutes after this strange movement, her phone suddenly went offline. Police later found it, shattered, lying on the road. A crucial question now became, did Susan have any issues at home? Any reason to run away? Could it be that she'd met someone, maybe a boy, who convinced her to leave? But those closest to her painted a very different picture. They described her as calm, responsible, and happy. There was no reason for her to want to leave, especially without telling anyone. No money was withdrawn from the account her mom had opened for her. She never logged into her social media accounts again. And most importantly, she didn't contact her family, people she had always been close to. She had no behavioral issues, no signs of rebellion. She was a kind, well-mannered girl with big dreams and plans for her future. So, what happened? It seemed clear Susan was walking home, and someone snatched her off the street. A short distance away, her phone was tossed out of a car window. And from that moment on, there was no sign of her. For 6 months, the search continued on the ground. Police used drones to scan the area, analyzed phone activity, and looked into known sex offenders and anyone previously convicted of similar crimes. Many were questioned, some were considered suspects, but nothing led anywhere. Then, in the 7th month, a call came in to emergency services from a man who said he was near a highway, about 40 kilometers from where Susan had disappeared. He'd been walking in the woods and had come across what he believed were human remains, a skeleton, in fact. Police responded immediately to the tip. Not far from the main road, just a few hundred meters into the woods, they discovered a human skeleton. Officers secured the area and called in a forensic investigation team. The medical examiner confirmed that the remains were human. But there were no clothes, no wallet, nothing that could help identify the victim. There were also no visible signs of trauma on the bones. At that point, investigators didn't even know whether the remains belonged to a male or female. One of the forensic specialists at the scene estimated the age to be around 17. This instantly raised the possibility that it could be Susan, who had been missing for several months. Nearby, investigators also found fingernails with traces of black nail polish. In one of the last photos Susan had posted online, she had black painted nails, just like those discovered at the scene. They also found several teeth. Dental records were obtained from Susan's family and compared to what had been found. Initially, the match wasn't clear, the dental x-rays were old, and they didn't align with the skull perfectly. So police requested updated dental records. Meanwhile, a massive ground search was launched. Volunteers, firefighters, police officers, and police academy recruits swept through the forest shoulder to shoulder, combing the area meticulously, crawling if they had to, looking for the tiniest clue. Every fragment, every detail could help solve the case. And then a breakthrough. One of the volunteers discovered a firearm. Just 30 meters from where the body was found, there lay a Glock pistol. It was in good condition and had a visible serial number. It looked like it had simply fallen from someone's holster. The gun had been reported stolen, and here's the twist, it was reported missing just a few hours after Susan vanished. That same night, there had also been a reported theft in the neighborhood where Susan was last seen, the same neighborhood where her friend lived. As the search continued, officers came across dyed hair in 2 colors, exactly the kind Susan Morales had at the time she disappeared. Teeth, hair, DNA, all of it pointed to the same thing, the body likely belonged to Susan Morales. At the same time, investigators began digging into the history of the stolen gun. And the result was shocking. The man who reported the firearm stolen was a security guard working in the same neighborhood where Susan was last seen. But that wasn't his only job. He was also a police officer. His name was Miles Bryant. Miles Bryant, a former soldier in his mid-20s, had been working as a police officer for 2 years. His precinct was located just 30 kilometers from where Susan had last been seen alive.
He grew up in the same town.
People knew him, but not necessarily for good reasons. It raised serious questions.
How did someone like him get into law enforcement in the first place?
It turned out Bryant had a questionable past. Around 5 years earlier, he had broken into a female friend's house. He tried to pry open a window, grabbed the door handle, and attempted to force his way inside. The girl had been home at the time and called the police. However, she didn't want to press charges. She just wanted Bryant to leave her alone. He later claimed that he only went there because he needed help with his homework and didn't intend to break in.
Authorities treated the incident as a one-off, something minor.
And if we didn't know what we know now, it might have been brushed off as nothing. They had gone to the same school. They knew each other.
But it didn't end there. Later, while already serving as a police officer, Bryant tried to break into yet another home.
This time, he was caught on security camera doing exactly what he had done before, pulling at the door handle, trying to force his way in. The woman involved had also reported him. She said she felt harassed and threatened by him, but once again, she didn't pursue charges. She just asked the police to speak to him and make him stop. An internal investigation was launched, but once again, Bryant faced no real consequences.
He was given a verbal warning. His excuse?
He said he had dated both women and simply wanted to talk to them, but they were ignoring him. Now, though, the situation had changed. With Bryant suddenly connected to Susan's disappearance and the discovery of her body, detectives decided it was time to dig deeper, especially into his phone records and location data. Around the same time, investigators received updated dental records. Combined with DNA from the teeth and hair found in the woods, they confirmed with 100% certainty that the remains belonged to Susan Morales.
It was heartbreaking.
There were still no visible injuries on the bones, and the decomposition made it impossible to determine a cause of death.
The lack of clothing suggested a possible sexual motive, though nothing could be confirmed.
Her family was devastated. They described Susan as joyful, friendly, and trusting. She loved singing and dancing, would dye her sister's hair for fun, played the piano, and had a voice everyone adored.
Now she was gone, and with her, all hope.
Investigators reviewed Bryant's phone data and watched body cam footage taken days before Susan's disappearance, as well as the video from the officers who responded to his report about the missing gun.
He behaved oddly.
He told them not to bother looking for the weapon, that he'd just buy another one. He downplayed the whole situation, yet insisted that it be documented officially, and this was just hours after Susan went missing.
He kept the gun's holster in a safe at home, but the gun itself was gone.
That raised red flags.
Why would someone steal a gun but leave the holster behind?
Detectives suspected he hadn't lost the gun, but rather discarded it and was reporting it stolen to cover his tracks. Cell phone data placed Bryant in the forest where Susan's body was found at 1 a.m. on the night she disappeared. He had both his work and personal phones with him.
That was 3 hours after Susan went missing.
Phone records showed he made 2 calls from his work phone and 1 from his personal device, all from the area where her body, and later the gun, were found. Police decided it was time to bring Miles Bryant in and search his home. As they arrived, Bryant was just about to head out to meet his girlfriend. The officers remained calm and friendly, they didn't want to spook him. Officially, they weren't coming to arrest a fellow officer, but rather to ask a few questions to a security guard who had patrolled the neighborhood where Susan had disappeared. They played it smart. They invited him to sit in the front seat of the squad car, making him feel safe and relaxed. They acted casual and even suggested that he might be eligible for a transfer to a better unit, maybe even a promotion. Bryant was visibly pleased. He told them that on the night of the disappearance, he had been on patrol in the neighborhood, but claimed he didn't see anything. He said he didn't know Susan and had only heard about the incident through social media. And that's when the officers dropped the bomb: "We've found your gun. And we've found Susan." Suddenly, his demeanor shifted. He began to stammer. His hands started trembling. And then they told him something even more alarming: that his gun had been discovered just a short distance from Susan's body, deep in the woods along the highway. Now clearly nervous, Bryant offered a bizarre explanation. He said he'd had an argument with his girlfriend that night. She'd allegedly caught him cheating, and in response, he drove around to blow off steam instead of reporting for his shift. He claimed his girlfriend had chased him in her car, and he eventually ditched her near the forest and ran into the woods to hide, possibly where he accidentally dropped his gun. The story made no sense. The detectives calmly told him that his phone had pinged in the exact area where Susan's remains were found. He grew even more anxious and stumbled over his words. He changed his story slightly, saying he didn't actually go into the woods, just hid behind the first tree at the edge of the forest. He insisted he had never met Susan Morales. Never even laid eyes on her. But here's the thing: cell tower data works differently in the US than in many other countries. In small towns, there may be only one or two towers, and they can cover a wide area, making location tracking less precise. But in the United States, especially in urbanized counties like Gwinnett, tower data can be accurate down to a few dozen meters. Officers confronted him with additional allegations: previous break-ins targeting women, but Bryant denied everything. He said he just wanted to talk to them. Claimed he knew them both and was never a threat. At that point, police took his phone and left him in the interview room. Watching from a surveillance camera, they could see him sweating, fidgeting, and panicking. The pressure was clearly getting to him. Meanwhile, detectives reached out to Bryant's ex-girlfriend to verify his alibi. She confirmed she had briefly driven to the neighborhood that night, but only to tell him off and break up with him. She never chased him. That idea had never even crossed her mind. She said he had lied to her, and she just wanted to be done with him. Her phone records proved that after leaving the neighborhood, she went straight home, confirming that Bryant's story was another lie. Detectives told him they'd spoken to her. He looked shocked and claimed maybe it wasn't her chasing him after all. Maybe it was someone else, and he had just assumed it was her. It became painfully obvious that the entire story was falling apart. There were still no clear forensic signs that Susan had been murdered. The condition of her remains made it impossible to say how she died. But the evidence was stacking up. Eventually, Miles Bryant was arrested, not yet for murder, but for filing a false police report and concealing the death of another person. These were weak charges, but the medical examiner couldn't determine a cause of death, leaving investigators with little else to go on. They were in a race against time. Bryant was behind bars, unable to interfere with the investigation anymore. His home and car were searched, but nothing new was found. Then came a crucial discovery in his phone's fitness tracking app. On the night of the disappearance, at 1:20 a.m., the app recorded him running 381 meters. Not walking, running. His pace confirmed it. 11 minutes later, he ran another 140 meters. Then, another 383. This pattern continued, all within the same stretch of woods. He was searching for something, likely the gun, but it was pitch black, and maybe he didn't have a flashlight. And then came the final nail in the coffin: his browser history. Search terms like "how long does it take for a body to decompose" were discovered at searches made after Susan went missing.
That was enough.
The prosecutor, armed with mounting circumstantial evidence and digital trails, charged Miles Bryant with the murder of Susan Morales. This case was especially disturbing because it involved someone who had sworn to protect others. A man wearing a badge had committed an unthinkable crime. But we must remember, he was the exception, not the rule. The vast majority of police officers, whether in the U.S. or anywhere else, dedicate their lives to serving the public with integrity.
But when one of them strays, the entire profession takes the hit.
It's not fair, but it happens in every field.
Doctors, nurses, firefighters, teachers.
One terrible mistake can stain the reputation of many. And no doubt, for many good and honest officers, it was shameful to know that someone like Miles Bryant ever wore the same uniform.
The one who should have protected, destroyed. The one who should have ensured safety, became the threat. After a thorough review of all the evidence, the search history, the location data, the lies, the firearm, and the body, the court found that everything pointed to one conclusion. Miles Bryant was the killer.
He was found guilty of the murder of 16-year-old Susan Morales and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
But the case didn't end there. Public outrage followed. How had someone like him ever become a cop? Why hadn't his earlier behavior been investigated?
And the most haunting question of all, how many others like him are still out there wearing a badge, carrying a gun? At a special press conference, the police promised a thorough internal audit. But to this day, the results of that audit have not been released. Thank you, my dear listeners, for joining me in this episode. New episodes are published every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. on the main channel, and every Wednesday and Sunday at 7 p.m. and 11 a.m. on the Crime Extra channel.
For now, I'm signing off.
Feel free to check out other podcast episodes available on the channel.
Wishing you a safe and peaceful week. Until next time.